Snortius charged forward atop his mighty squig Pogchomp. The lesser snotlings rode with him on their own ravenous beasts. But Snortius the first and only was the one to enter the domain of Hume Megaopolis first, which to Hume eyes was a mere 10 farmhouses and a town hall. But this was no small undertaking in the minds of the diminutive greenskins. The squig hoppers tore through the fields, looking for Humies to run down as the other units marched behind them and fanned out, using the tall leafy crops as cover. Bringing up the rear was Brain, who commanded the 3 catapults as they rolled inexorably forward. With Frank dead, the invasion had largely gone unnoticed. Emmett was sitting in his own tower, a little north of where the greenskins had broken through the fence. With the distance and the tall crops dulling the sound of the breakthrough, he had noticed nothing yet. Emmett sighed a bored sigh as he picked up a small voxcaster, pressed the button on the outside, and called.
Hey, Frank, how are things going down south?
There was no reply.
Frank? Buddy? Oh, damn it, Frank, I know it's boring, but wake up.
Emmett scooped up a set of magnoculars and took a look over to Frank's tower. But he could see nothing. Frank wasn't even sitting up in his chair. Something was amiss. Emmett scanned Frank's section, and his eyes were drawn to movement in the fields. Strange creatures, with little green men riding on top, were trampling down the crops. The big one among them seemed to be armed with a las weapon. Emmett looked again to the break in the fence, and he saw the army of greenskins marching into Greenvale. The man took up his las gun and began ringing the alarm bell. Whatever in the hells these things were, he wasn't going to let them ruin their crops and get away with it. As the bells rang out, Snortius realized that he didn't have much time. He needed to catch whatever Humies he could by surprise before they could get organized. As the squig hoppers charged through the dense crops, they stumbled across Elwood, who had been picking bugs and parasites off the crops. The man dropped his basket at the sight of the fierce jaws of Pogchomp. Before Elwood could even cry out, Snortius mercilessly ran him through with his spear. Pogchomp bit down on the man's legs and began shaking the lower half of his body as he was rapidly torn to pieces at the end of Snortius's lance. As Snortius cheered in triumph over his first kill in the battle, hot las blasts flew overhead from the remaining towers. The mutated snot boss gave Pogchomp a good kick and urged him forward. Meanwhile, the rest of the army moved out. Snotbo and his commandos slipped out of Frank's tower and began sneaking northeast towards Emmett's position, while Brain turned his catapults to the northwest, targeting the guard tower in that direction. Snortius scoured the fields for any more Humies that he might be able to run down with the squig hoppers, but he found none. He wheeled Pogchomp around with another las blast from the tower whizzing overhead. He made for the town proper. He would kill the Humies wherever he could find them. Brain began taking shots as well as the guard Humie in the tower began to fire on him. He must have been nervous, because he missed just about everything, managing only to scorch a few of the catapults. Brain needed to take his shot. The longer he spent arranging and aiming the catapults, the more likely it was that members of his crew would be killed. And if he lost any of them, there was no way he'd be able to crew and fire all 3 catapults. After a few quick calculations, the brain gave the order, and the 3 canisters of snot fire were flung high into the air in the direction of the Hume tower. Davy, who was manning the tower, was firing as rapidly as he could when he saw the bright yellow ceramic jars of snot fire sailing through the air with smoke trailing behind from their lit fuses. One jar smashed short at the base of his tower, spreading the flaming squig dung. Another overshot the tower by just a hair. But the last jar struck Davy directly in the chest, and he was immediately engulfed in extremely stinky flames. He panicked and tried to beat out the flames as he scrambled in the tower. In his panic, he fell with a loud thud. He did not get up. One less git. Meanwhile, Snotbo carefully snuck up on Emmet's position with his commando snots. As Emmet fired again and again at the advancing snotlings, Snotbo and his crew silently snuck through the crops and climbed the ladder at the base of his tower. And Emmet was none the wiser. Or at least that would be true until Two Heads, a 2-headed mutant snot who had recently joined the commando squad, felt one of his noses twitch.
Achoo! Bless you. Oops.
Emmet whirled around on the commandos.
So get him! Get him!
Emmet yelled in surprise and put a boot into one of the faces of Two Heads as the rest of the commandos tried to swarm over him. Snotius saw the Humies running into the houses. The squig hoppers wouldn't be much use in door-to-door fighting. He needed the rest of the army to arrive. Charging in by himself was a good way to get himself snicked. Instead, he gave Pogchomp another good kick and began racing around the outside of town, trying to find other Humies that might be running for cover. Shotgun fire began to spray from the windows of the houses as the squig hoppers trampled past. A lucky shot claimed the first casualty of the battle as Das Chef was blasted off his squig, his tiny form spattered to pieces. The Brain, having successfully destroyed one of the towers, wheeled his catapults on and prepared for their next target. As Snortius also wheeled around the town, the main body of the army finally arrived on the outskirts of town. Tree Climber's boys were first to arrive, though they came under heavy fire immediately from the houses. Las blasts and shotgun pellets flew through the air towards the diminutive soldiers. Tree Climber leveled his las gun, looking for a target, when the snot to his right, Dingo, was suddenly blasted to pieces. To his left, Red Shirt 3 was struck by a las blast and was vaporized, leaving behind 2 little charred feet. Stinky's unit came up behind Tree Climber to support them as they pushed forward. "For Snortius! For Snortantinople!" Stinky fired and hit just below the window that one of the Humies was shooting from.
For Dingo! For Red Shirt 3!
Tree Climber pulled the trigger on his las gun and struck the Humie directly in the face as he tumbled back away from the window. The battle was far from over, but first blood had been drawn by both sides. These Humies were a clever and resourceful bunch. It would take every ounce of Snortius's cunning to outsmart the Humie Gits in their fortified super huts. As he was pondering, the Snot Boss was startled by a fleeing Humy who suddenly stumbled out of the crops directly in front of the Squig Hoppers. Snortius tried to lower his spear to skewer the Humy, but he wasn't fast enough, and Pogchomp bounded past the man. However, Soggy, the little snotling, he was prepared. Filled with war and bloodlust, he leapt from his squig and latched onto the Humy's face, clawing and biting and scratching frantically. His squig bit the man hard on the ankle, and he tumbled to the ground and was quickly surrounded and dispatched by the other greenskins with bites and stabs. Snortius raised his spear and cried out, "Wah!" The cry was echoed by the tiny greenskins as they moved into the town proper, preparing to go door to door for the most intense fighting of the battle. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but things were about to get interesting.
No man do they call me. My mother and my father, and all my comrades as well. Thank you all for listening to the latest episode of Growing the Tribe. If you enjoyed what you heard, please leave a like and a comment so that you too can lead an army to victory against an impossible, heavily entrenched foe. If you haven't yet subscribed, please do so in order to hear more stories about the little guy standing up to the big guy and then possibly eating the big guy. If you would like to support me, my Patreon, PayPal, and Teespring stores are linked below. And if you have absolutely no idea what's going on, you can click on the Growing the Tribe playlist, which should be appearing on screen right now. Thank you all once again for listening. No Man out.